we do screeches here on the boat, and Duncan downstairs take care of that for you. So you go down and see him, and he'll give you a nice little setup on what we'll do on our way home. So you want to get involved in the screeching on the way home? Be welcomed into Newfoundland right here on this lovely, beautiful Sunday morning. Another one. 7 o'clock, we got a little one there, little growler, as they say. Now remember that these things are pretty big, so underground there, you got 9/10 of that, so that thing is probably sitting there all grounded and gouging the old sea floor. So, you know, they're a little bit on the hazard. If you have any transatlantic cables or anything, they could cause some damage. Off the shores of Newfoundland, we have oil rigs, and they can become an issue for oil rigs. They're a danger to fishing and stuff, and a danger to the shipping lanes. Now on the for hypothermia reasons, and for an iceberg too, the same thing. They won't last long at those kind of temperatures. And in terms of the Titanic, the iceberg that it hit, maybe it lasted, maybe they said 4 or 5 days more later, or more than that actually, before it struck the warmer waters and then melted away. So these are big things, but it takes a while. These warmer temperatures eat away at all different parts of the surface area, on the outside and underneath, and as they degrade, heading down through from the north to the south. Mike is going to head off from this iceberg now. Captain Mike is going to head on now towards the first island in the Witness Bay Ecological Reserve. I'm going to move on up there. I'll get my bearings, find out where I'm to, given the fact I've already been lost this Monday morning. I'll come back and chat with you again in a little while.
You can see them off the coast of New York because they get in the water that's about 20 degrees warmer than here. And that's where they'll quickly end their day. If you want to get really up close and personal to an iceberg, we do have iceberg beer and iceberg vodka downstairs. And it's always nice to have a little taste of what you're looking at. They also have a washroom/kitchen facility, and that's where they will store the small little bait fish that they come here for. They will store that away, and they will also store their own guano for future use as building material. Like us Canadians, when we go down to Florida for the winter, we will winterize our homes. Pray to God that the storms don't break while we're gone. These puffin burrows are very vulnerable. They're very, very fragile. If the human was to walk in them, we would flatten them out. So what they do with their guano is they store the seeds. Before they leave here, they will use cement or stucco to reinforce the burrows. Now if you look ahead of us, what's in the water, over at our 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position, we have a lot of common birds sitting on the water there. And that's the birds of the Alcid family. Their most comfortable position and the safest place for them is on the water. If you see us approaching the birds with the boat, they don't fly away, they just simply dive down. And these birds are capable of swimming up to 25 miles per hour, which is about 3 times faster than this boat trout. Now, right alongside of us, folks, we have a bare rock. And if you can imagine the common birds that are sitting on the water over there, all residing on these rocks for the summertime. Once the eggs come, they have no choice but to stay. But they are staying away from the rocks at this point in time because birds of prey are after them at all times. The eagle that we saw back in the harbor, when they come out here, they can drive all of the birds to the rock. And if you can imagine this particular place here, there's about 20,000, but over 10,000 pairs of hummingbirds will make this their breeding station. They again stand shoulder to shoulder. They dig a burrow, find a burrow that's abandoned, and they will maintain that throughout their whole courtship. They're monogamous, however, when they leave here at the end of the breeding season, they will separate and go off into the open ocean. In the case of the puffins, they go south to where the Gulf Stream intersects with the Labrador Park.
Então bem,
They will wallow in the warm waters of that part of the world, of the coastal
Here they
states,
go.
right over to the coast of Greenland.
There they all go.
Now, as we go by here, you'll see the erosion has taken its effect on the island. In this particular place, that's where common murres will stand and gather. Common murre is a much hardier bird, quite a bit larger, and they outnumber the puffin on the island to reproduce, and they will come back to the exact 4 square inch spot year after year. Unlike the puffins, these birds will accompany their chick. After the chick fledges, the adult male will accompany the chick for the first 6 to 8 months of its life. Puffins simply abandon their chicks in the burrows when they're mature enough to fledge, and the puffin is on its own then. Making it away from these islands is the most dangerous part of their journey. So what happens is that the little chick, once it's mature enough to leave the island, will be encouraged by the father. Now, the way they know each other on the rock is that they start to sing a special family song to the chick while it's still in the egg. And when the chick is born, it can identify the breeding pair, and the breeding pair can identify their own individual chick. When it comes time to leave the island, the father will get down into the water and will start to sing that family song. The curious chick will say, "What in the name of God is Dad doing down there calling out to me? He usually comes up here on this rock and feeds me a fresh capelin every morning for my breakfast." So the chick will get curious and will edge its way out to the edge of the rock. And while this is occurring, the mother will sneak up behind it. And when it gets close enough to the edge, she will give it a little peck on the cheek, and then she will firmly plant her foot squarely into the shoulder blades of the chick and drive it out over the edge of the rock. That's where 50% of them don't make it. The seagulls will get them right there. But if they're lucky enough to get to the water, then the adult male will start to sing that family song. And the chick will be encouraged to get away from the island as quickly as possible. This generally happens under the cover of darkness. And then they will start their first migration together. The adult male will take the chick on the open ocean, and their first migration will take them to the west coast of Greenland. They will do 90% of that journey, which takes them back here to these islands next spring. 90% of that journey will be done in the water. They will swim from here to Greenland and back.